what specifically do you want to see in those 90 days? What kind of progress do you want to see in those 90 days and have agreed to by then to not ratchet up the tariffs? Because it is just a pause, right?
Yes, so
the tariffs then snap back, basically, if you don't have something agreed upon that is substantive.
So the Chinese April 2nd number was 34, continues to be 34%. I'll let Ambassador Greer answer the first question. And just like with all our other trading partners, as long as there is good faith effort, engagement, and constructive dialogue, then we will keep moving forward.
I would just say, Jenny, with respect to, the president's message and ultimate rates, I mean, everything is a negotiation, right? And the president, he gives the Secretary of the Treasury and I and other members of the cabinet direction and advice on how to proceed. And we ended up at a result that is very good for the United States, very good for China as well. We retain our 10% global baseline tariff, which we have on other countries. We have, in addition to that, previous measures that we've retained, which have been, frankly, effective in reducing the U.S. bilateral trade deficit with China over the past few years. So that leaves us in a very good position all in with respect to measures on Chinese imports, but more importantly, leaves us in a constructive path forward to have a positive conversation with the Chinese on how to rebalance and have more constructive trade.
Great. In the back, Associated Press.
Associated Press. Hi, I'm Jamie from Associated Press. We just heard our colleague talk about 30% tariffs. I'm just trying to understand these numbers here because they're all over the place. We were at 145 before, apparently, and 125, I believe, from the Chinese side. So can you say clearly now that, I think the question was, right now for the 90-day period, the U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods will be down to 30%? Is that correct for the 30? Could you speak?
So again, this agreement is really about the reciprocal tariff, which was imposed by the United States on April 2nd, and the escalatory steps which followed. Those on each side, the Chinese side and U.S. side, ended up at 125% on each other. The Chinese had additional non-tariff countermeasures. That has all come down by 115% to 10% each. The United States earlier this year imposed 20% related to fentanyl. That still exists. So if you're looking at Trump Term 2, tariffs on China, right now effective, it's 30%. There are prior measures which change by product, by sector, by level, et cetera. You can't really give a specific number on that right now. What matters for the agreement today is that we each agreed to come down on the reciprocal tariff and related retaliation to 10%. So a reduction of 115% down to 10%. Fentanyl is on its own track, but on a very positive track where we're having very constructive conversations with our Chinese counterparts.
And I would add a couple of things. This does not include any sector-specific tariffs that have been put across all of our trading partners. And as the ambassador said, I think he would agree with me that the upside surprise for me from this weekend was the level of Chinese engagement on the fentanyl crisis in the United States. They brought the Deputy Minister for Public Safety, who is not traditionally part of the trade team or the negotiating team, and he had a very robust and highly detailed discussion with someone from the U.S. National Security Team.
Great. Next, John Huddy with Newsmax.
Mr. Secretary, will there be any immediate impact that U.S. consumers will see from this? And what was the toughest part of the talks? The Chinese are, notorious for being very difficult negotiators. Was there any moment that you felt the talks could break down? And as far as the fentanyl, I'm sorry, I know there's 3 questions here, but what are the Chinese willing to do in terms of the fentanyl crisis? Did they make any promises or any agreements to combat fentanyl?
Okay. Well, there's a lot to unpack there, so let me recap that. So you're asking U.S. consumers, the last one was fentanyl, and what was the second question?
Toughest part of the negotiation.
Well, I'll start there first. Both sides represented their national interest well, but we also concluded that we had shared interest and that neither side was interested in a decoupling. And again, a lot of back and forth on various differences in views on fair trade. We informed them, I had a discussion, that trade deficits are a result of three things. One, terms of trade. Two, currency. And then three, the United States fiscal position. We informed them that Trump administration is working very hard on containing this out-of-control fiscal deficit that we inherited from the previous administration. Two, there was no discussion on currency. And one, it was on terms of trade. And on fentanyl, again, for the first time, there was engagement between two teams with detailed knowledge. And I think for the first time, the Chinese understood the magnitude of what is happening in the U.S. In 2018 in Buenos Aires. They did a good job of banning the actual fentanyl. But what we have seen is substantial interaction between bad Chinese actors and many North American drug dealers, especially Mexican cartels. Treasury has designated several of the Mexican cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. We made that clear to the Chinese. They were very receptive. As you may or may not know, the Chinese have very draconian measures for the sale of illicit narcotics in China, and we have asked them to be equally as draconian with the people who are poisoning Americans.
And let me make a point. Your question about what was the toughest part of the negotiation, I would submit it was actually, in the lead up to the negotiation, trying to repair channels of communication that had atrophied under the last administration, where, our office, for example, the Office of the United States Trade Representative, had almost no substantive discussions with the Chinese side on trade. And although we have significant differences with the Chinese on trade and economics, and we have major complaints, you have to discuss these complaints. You have to have a channel for discussions, and overcoming that was a substantial challenge. And a lot of work went into that over the past several weeks, so that by the time we got here, we were able to be very pragmatic with each other. And to be sure, there were tough things to deal with on the level of removal, the timing for implementation, managing each side's domestic politics, et cetera. And I won't go into too much detail. But I would say the toughest part was simply getting to a position where we could, in good faith, both sides work with each other. And once we did, we were able to do this in a couple of days. This is not the first time I've done trade negotiations with the Chinese, and sometimes it can take a very, very long time to overcome misunderstandings. We were able to do that effectively over the past few weeks, which enabled us to be very pragmatic and effective this weekend.
And I think we leave with a very good mechanism to avoid the unfortunate escalations as we saw after April 2nd from happening again. What had been very unusual about the relationship was that President Trump, Party Chairman Xi, they have a good relationship, but that the nature of what has happened since April 2nd could have been avoided if we had had this kind of mechanism in place, and I believe it is in place now. I think we leave today with a process